analysis on the cultural aspect of Philo's child. As you already know, is based in South Africa, and the way that they lived in that area and at that time is a lot different from today, so we wanted to make it a little easier to relate to. The first part is the religion in South Africa. Most people know that it is predominantly Christian, but there are a lot of other religions in there just because of the different diversity and all the variety of different people down there. You could tell from the text that there was a reverend at the funeral for David or Dawa's funeral, and that shows how the Komati family was Christian too. The woodcutters didn't really have a religion, and we're going to talk about how that affected Luke or Benjamin's life in a little bit. The religion is also a heavy influence in education. A lot of things that the kids will learn as they're growing up in their education is based on religion. Somebody talked about yesterday how spiritually they use animals as symbols of their future, and a lot of that has to do with different types of religions that are in this culture. So one question I wanted you guys to think about is, what was Lucas or Benjamin's relationship with God, and do you feel like it changed when he went from the Komati family to the woodcutter family? So that's just one thing that we can talk about quickly. No, Philo used it a lot. Yeah.
I was going to say, when they talked, Philo gives lots of references, the land of you and all these different things, but she talks about how she's so proud about how he reads the Bible, and then that's never brought up at all with the woodcutters.
Right. And I feel like when he's Benjamin, he agrees with a lot of it, and I think Philo did a good job incorporating it into his life, but I don't really feel like he carried that over to the woodcutter family. I don't think he ever felt like when he was in times of stress that he could pray or that he could look to God to see that his future would turn out okay. I don't think he ever did that. So I think Philo changed it in the way that she was able to incorporate it and he was aware of it, but I don't know if Elias and his family really took that away from him. I just don't feel like he ever was able to use it that much. So that was one interesting part of the culture that wasn't really in place for his life. The other part of the culture is the economy, and South African economy is really influenced by a lot of other economies just because of all the trade they did. Especially back then, you really couldn't have their own currency, so you notice they did mention pennies in the story, so that was one American influence just based on the trade that they did with other different countries. But also, the family was poor, so they had to use subsistence farming, which is basically just them growing their own crops for the profit of them. They weren't growing it to sell to different companies or to other families. They had to make their own money by doing their own work. And that's how they fed themselves. So the Komati family really didn't need all the money and all that because they were, you get the money so you can feed your family, but if they're living on a farm, they can just grow the food anyway and they can eat based on their own work. That also you can tell by the Van Ruin family that they didn't really have a lot of opportunities. Like it wasn't that if Benjamin got that education, he was going to be able to move away, go to a big city or anything like that. He had to be able to do all the things that the people in his family could do. If he was with the Komatis, he had to be able to learn how to farm and learn how to raise the domesticated animals. But if he was with the Van Ruins, he would have had to learn how to do all the woodwork and all the woodcutting. So one question we had about that is, how was the economic status of each family an effect on Lucas or Benjamin? Do you feel like he was better off if he would have been raised by the woodcutter family, and you think that he would have done better at that, or do you think he was okay with Philo?
Well, I think that probably Philo taught him better morals or things about how to be smart with your money. I think that Elias wasted a lot of his money. Like he bought 5 guns that didn't work. He just kept saving up all his money and spending it. So I think that he learned a lot better life skills from Philo.
I think Philo was able to incorporate what they did with a lot more pride because what they did affected how much food they got to eat at night. So I think that was a little more into Benjamin's head, and it wasn't hard for him to adjust to the woodcutter life. He eventually learned, but it was still a lot different.
So this is when you asked which one would he have been better off with, was that
Yeah.
thinking about that, I think he could have done either, but I don't think he would have been better off with either. I think even from a child, even when he was a little child, all he wanted to do was do things with the water. And so I feel like neither the woodcutters nor woodcutting nor farming was really right for him. What was right for him was, rowing in the boats and the water.
Learning how to sail. Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because when they talk about the wealth, I thought about this question after I wrote it, and really the value of wealth for Faela and her family wasn't the same as the Van Ruin family. Like Elias, he felt like his wealth was being able to have a different job from everyone else and being able to make his own money. But Faela was all about the family working together to support the family. It was all about them, and it was a lot closer knit. So maybe the way he was raised to learn how to work from Faela is a lot different from Elias, but I don't feel like either one of them influenced him more in any way. I think you were right with the water.
I agree with what Mrs. Ball said, and I think that, like, although he probably wouldn't have gone into either trade, Faela probably would have prepared him better for whatever he went into either way, because she was much more humble about, like, their wealth status, but also more responsible with their money. So.
It's kind of like just her morals and the way that she valued her work ethic and her son's work ethic. I thought that was a lot more influential. So yeah.
Alright, so the South African family structures are a little different than how ours are now, as they were in South Africa then. The male and female statuses, the men are definitely the leader of the household. If there is no man in the household, then the female will take over the house for a short amount of time. Say if like he's on a business trip out of town somewhere, then she'll take over, but she still has to take care of all the kids and everything else. There's the chores and everything with the and they also
He's the
the labor roles are also divvied up by the gender, which is also part of their family structure. The women in the rural African communities will only do agricultural work and take care of all of the kids and do the chores in the house, such as preparing the meals, keeping the house clean, and the men will take care of the livestock. They'll take care of the heavy agriculture, and they are sometimes migrant workers. But if there's no man in the household, then a woman can become a migrant worker. In the urban cultures, in the urban South African cultures, the men and women both work outside instead of agriculture, instead of on a farm or wood cutting. And the women still will have to take care of the children and still take care of the house on top of their work outside of the house. And either one can be a migrant worker, whether or not the man is gone or not. If a woman is a migrant worker, then she still has to, and the man will finally have to take care of the kids in the house. And I wonder, did either of the families portray what the normal gender roles were?
What was the question?
Did either of the families follow the normal gender roles at this time?
I think, like, I don't know, it seemed like Faela kind of ran the show, maybe because Sally was growing ill, or, I mean, he was tired all the time. But, I think in the woodcutters, it was definitely more, like, that stereotype or whatever you have up there, because, Barda was just kind of in the house all the time, and, Elias was the one who had to, support the family with making the beans. So I think they kind of differ.
That's good.
Okay, so continue with South Africa. I did childhood was. So how he talked about male and gender roles, well, this is more specific as to like just children, since Benjamin was a child like throughout the first part of the book. So these are just some statistics about children in South Africa. Like 1 in 20 infants die before their first birthday, and 3 in every 5 children live in a poor household. And then their illiteracy rate, and only 96% of children between 0 and 17 attend school.
Can you just wait 1 second?
A big population in South Africa is mainly children. You good? Okay, so I looked up farm living versus forest living since that was the main places where both of the families lived. And as farm living, it's mostly plateaus and they have regional trade. They're self-sufficient, which Jordan was talking about, how they make their own crops and they pretty much supply themselves. They are a close-knit community since they are pretty much cut off from everyone else. And they have their children as workers, so I mean, you don't really get a childhood in South Africa. You're pretty much born to do the work with your family. And in forest living, it's dense and cut off, kind of like farm living, and their children do work too. It's patriarchal, and they are cut off from other communities. Okay, so just a question to think about is based on the statistics that I gave you and your common knowledge, how does the childhood in South Africa compare to your own? Not just physically and how they live, but mentally, how you grew up and how Benjamin grew up differently in South Africa. Go ahead.
Well, with my childhood, I had a fun childhood, and I didn't have to really worry about physical work, I guess, because Lucas and Benjamin pretty much had to physically work on the farm or in the forest. And I lived by community, and they kind of just, and I was supported by my parents, and I didn't have to work